Hello everyone, this is part 3 of What If Naruto Was Like the Sage of Six Paths, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
A lone figure, illuminated into shadow by the setting sun behind him, strode over the crest of an enormous sand dune, a trail of slowly disappearing footsteps in his wake. A long brown cloak billowed in the warm breeze behind him, protecting his body from the harsh desert winds and sandstorms that were common for the area. He wasn't very tall or imposing, barely standing at a somewhat respectable height of 4 feet and 7 inches for his age. However, there was something about him that if somebody saw him pass by, it would catch their attention. Perhaps it was the single Magatama bead dangling from his ear that glinted as it caught the fading light of the sun. Maybe it was the occasional hits of bright blonde hair that would appear from underneath his hood when the wind would blow it back. It might have even been the tall shakuju that jingled with each of his steps, the staff actually reaching higher than he himself was tall. More than likely though, it was the fact that as soon as any sand on the wind came within a meter of his form, it would bounce back, as if repelled by some invisible force or barrier. The figure came to a stop, resting slightly on the staff that surprisingly didn't sink into the sand at all, despite supporting his weight. He gazed around for a moment, the shadows his hood provided hiding the direction his eyes were looking. Finally he tugged it back, releasing a shock of bright golden hair, tied up at the back into the beginning of a short, spiky ponytail. He enjoyed the view around him of vast dunes of golden sand stretching off into the distance as far as the eye could see, warm but steely violet eyes narrowed into slits. His protective cloak continued to billow as he simply stood there, enjoying the moment as the scorching day began to descend into freezing night, leaving a brief twilight hour where everything was still and peaceful. Stars began to peek out of the sky, emboldened by the slow descent of the sun retreating behind the horizon. A fond smile found its way across his whiskered cheeks as he thought back to the events that led him here, the good and the bad. Good morning, Naruto, you look much better now that you've had time to settle and eat. How are you finding the temple so far? A young blonde looked up with a smile that held both excitement and unending gratitude toward the much older monk. It's great. The monks are really nice, and even though Sora can be really annoying sometimes, he is friendly and helps me with stuff when Chiraku is busy. Chukaku smiled contentedly as he ruffled Naruto's hair. The blonde was so happy about his new life that he didn't even care. I'm glad. Just make sure that if there's anything you need or if you ever have any questions or concerns, you come right to me. Okay. The small whiskered child nodded excitedly, making Chukaku's heart warm to see such innocence return to the boy's features. Master Chukaku, there is something Chiraku-senpai wanted me to talk to you about. The wizened monk hummed for the boy to continue with a small nod. He said that I should be able to turn off my Rinnegan, but I can't pull the chakra out of my eyes. Chukaku raised an eyebrow at that, looking closely at Naruto's eyes and felt around for his chakra. Sure enough, there was a small build-up behind his eyes, obviously what was keeping the Rinnegan active. I don't believe there is anything to worry about, Naruto. It is true that Sharingan and Byakugan wielders alike have the ability to deactivate the Dojutsu, but the Rinnegan is far more mysterious than theirs. For all we know, it cannot be deactivated by the will of the user. He smiled fondly as he ushered the blonde closer, planting a warm hand on the boy's shoulder. Then again, maybe you simply lack the control to do so. Don't forget you have only recently begun to train in the use and control of your chakra. The boy scowled at that but still seemed to accept the older man's words. Do you feel any more tired than before you received those eyes? Naruto quickly shook his head in the negative. Do they cause you any pain at all? Again he got a quick head shake to say no. Do you feel at all uncomfortable with people seeing your eyes? This time Chukaku saw Naruto hesitate for a moment before shaking his head more slowly and uncertainly. Chukaku smiled knowingly as he got to a knee, something that was increasingly difficult as he got older. Naruto, it is perfectly alright to be afraid of something new, but I hope you understand that the eyes you now possess were a gift. One you have earned from your hardships. He chuckled slightly as he pulled himself back to his feet, ruffling the boy's hair as he did so. This time it did earn him a look of annoyance. If worst comes to worst and you still feel uncomfortable, then do what I do. He smiled childishly even though his eyes stayed narrowed as always. He was glad to see Naruto giggle a little, his usual confidence returning. Thanks Master Chukaku, you're really smart. The wizened monk grinned again, ushering the young blonde out of his office playfully. And don't you forget it. Naruto smiled fondly at the warm memory, eyes crinkled into slits in a way that had always seemed to annoy Sora, so of course Naruto had begun to do it all the time, copying their aging master. He began to walk again, slowly and carefully descending the dune, the staff in his right hand jingling with every movement. He looked up for a moment, spotting the moon begin to show itself in the last moments of sunlight still streaming in over the horizon. Naruto sat up on the roof of the living quarters building, just staring up at the sky, specifically the moon. In his eyes it seemed to radiate a thin silver aura that Naruto always found beautiful since coming to the temple. He wasn't supposed to be up here, in fact the caretaker always got incredibly annoyed when he found the young blonde up on the roof. Even so Naruto couldn't sleep, his dreams once again invaded by scenes of destruction and wreckage. It was like he was in a body not his own, looking through eyes that weren't his down on events he had no control over. The nightmares didn't come that often, but when they did he could never go back to sleep. Instead he would come up here and just think for a while, about his new life, about the future, about the responsibilities his powers and burden placed on his shoulders. He heard soft footsteps on the tiles and looked up, expecting to see Chigasu ready to berate him for not respecting the sacredness of the temple roof. Instead he was surprised to find Sora there instead, the boy walking over with perfect balance to sit next to the blonde. Nightmare again. Naruto simply nodded, his eyes drifting back to the mysterious white orb hanging in the sky. The same one. Again Naruto nodded as his head drooped, pulling his knees up into his chest protectively. Always. Sora sighed as he placed a comforting hand on his friend's shoulder, which did relax Naruto slightly. Suddenly he tensed, pulling away from the contact as he turned his eyes away from Sora, instead following a crack along a roof tile. I'm sorry Sora. The blue-haired pseudo-Jinchuriki just looked around in confusion, blinking in surprise at Naruto's cold tone. For what? The blonde sighed deeply as he once again faced forward, this time looking out, over the temple and into the surrounding forests. It's been almost 3 months and I haven't found anything to help you yet. I haven't kept my promise to you. Sora blinked for a moment before a sad smile slipped onto his features as he too looked out over the temple, in vaguely the same direction as his friend was. I never asked you to make that silly promise, what you're trying to do should be impossible anyway. Naruto scoffed at that, but some of the cold edge disappeared, his eyes narrowing in a challenging way. Like the sage creating the moon. Naruto laughed at his own comment but was surprised when Sora suddenly lay back on the roof, staring up at the faraway disk. Hey, what if he did it? I mean really did it? Naruto blinked before falling back next to his friend. Then he'd be way more powerful than even the legends make him out to be. Sora smirked slightly at that, pulling his hands up to rest underneath his head. I'm going to be like that one day. He heard Naruto scoff next to him and was immediately up on his elbows, tick mark quickly forming on his temple. What's so funny? Naruto just grinned as he continued to stare at the moon, completely uncaring of the looming fist of his friend. Please, if you ever get that powerful then I'll be able to move the moon around with a flick of my wrist. This time it was Sora's turn to scoff as the anger leaked out of him, turning into amusement as he flopped back down onto his back. Right, moving the moon. He chuckled at himself, what was I thinking? Naruto finally looked around, the challenge clearly sparkling in his eyes as his earlier sadness seemed a thing of the past. You're on. Sora blinked in surprise, an incredulous expression developing on his face as he just stared at his blonde friend in shock. That wasn't a challenge, Naruto. Naruto snorted, crossing his arms and looking away haughtily in an exaggerated impersonation of the blue-haired boy. Just because you know you'll lose. Sora was immediately on his feet, his fist raised and other finger pointed accusingly at the blonde. I'll never lose to you. He blinked in surprise when Naruto just burst out laughing, the anger ebbing out of him as he realized it had been a joke. A few minutes later and they were once again on their backs, just staring up at the sky. So how would you do it? Sora just looked around in confusion at the blonde who had an unusually thoughtful expression. How would you move the moon? Sora blinked slowly before shrugging. I don't know, but you know what Master Chukaku says, if there is a problem we can't solve, as long as we have friends they'll be there to lighten the burden. Naruto smiled fondly at that, a small chuckle gracing his lips. Yeah, I guess you're right. He trailed off, blinking once, then twice, then a few more times as he suddenly shot up into a sitting position. Sora could swear he saw the cogs turning in the boy's head before Naruto suddenly shot to his feet, his eyes wide with excitement. That's it. Before Sora could even ask, he found both his hands grabbed, pulling him into a standing position as Naruto began to bounce around the rooftop with him. Sora, you're a genius. The blue-haired boy blinked before a small blush settled over his nose and a rather haughty smile fell on his features. Well, I don't know. When he looked up though, Naruto was gone. The pseudo-Jinchuriki looked around but his blonde friend had vanished. Ahem. Sora froze suddenly, his head slowly swiveling to look at a very irate Chigasu holding his almost infamous wooden spoon in one hand as he taped it irritably against his forearm. Well, what do we have here? Sora began to stutter as he backed away from the clearly angry caretaker before stopping as he reached the edge of the roof. Well, you see, Chigasu-senpai, well, you see, it's like. Damn it, Naruto. Naruto laughed fondly at the memory as he began to climb up another large dune, neither the steep climb nor loose footing seemingly giving him any trouble. He had replaced his hood, the shadows once again falling over his face, as well as pulling up a scarf to cover his mouth and whisker marks. It was beginning to grow cold as sun vanished, the heat in the ground quickly dispersing and rising up into the air. He absently rubbed a phantom wound on his side as he thought about another life-changing event from the past 4 years. Geez, Naruto, calm down, would you? You'd think you were the one who was finally getting rid of their inner demon. Even though Sora tried to sound nonchalant about the whole business, he couldn't keep his own excitement out of his voice. It was finally happening. After Naruto had run off and left him on the roof to deal with a certain angry caretaker, Sora had gone out to find him. Apparently something about their conversation had given Naruto an idea on how to finally free Sora of the Kyuubi's chakra. He didn't understand the technical version of the blonde's plan, but simplified it pretty much involved him using many shadow clones to siphon off the Kyuubi's chakra. The main problem with removing a Bayu from the host was that such a large amount of such potent and corrosive chakra being channeled through a specific spot on the Jinchuriki, namely the seal, caused an overload of the chakra network in that area, creating a chain reaction which killed the host. Only those with incredibly potent chakra of their own or a durable body would be able to survive such a thing. Unfortunately, most unsealing methods did exactly that. Unseal the binding on the Bayu. This meant the chakra would be freed all at once, in one place. Using Naruto's Preta path, they had a unique opportunity to draw out the chakra directly, from as many different places as Naruto could make clones. Of course it would still hurt, but with the extraction being spread out it wouldn't be fatal, or even all that damaging. Of course it was only speculation, so any complications that might arise were completely unknown. Chukaku had at first seemed hesitant when Naruto brought this before him, but ultimately he believed it was Sora's choice. Overjoyed at the chance to finally be rid of what he firmly saw as a curse and burden, the blue-haired boy practically jumped at the chance. Of course, just to be safe, Naruto had spent a few weeks practicing with his Preta path to make sure everything was ready. It would do no good to draw out Sora's chakra with the Kyuubis. Come on, what's taking so long? One of the 4 clones Naruto had created looked up in irritation, the others following suit from afar in a way Sora found slightly creepy. The shared vision may have been useful in a fight, but the pseudo-Jinchuriki always found it strange when the multiple blondes would do things in unison. Then again, that was only to be expected when they were all essentially the same person with the same sight. Be patient, you've been waiting 4 months for this, you can wait a few more minutes for the monks to finish their seal. Sure enough, around them a few monks were drawing out a large and powerful containment seal on the ground. It was more for the sake of comfort than actual protection. If worst came to worst, it wouldn't hold out all that long against a cubified Sora. Yeah, speak for yourself, I can't wait to be finally free. Naruto just smiled at his friend. For the past week or so Sora had become more and more anxious. He was happy to see his friend so excited, but he also thought it would be rather strange after all was said and done. He had always kind of enjoyed knowing that he and Sora shared the same burden. It was something that connected them, an unspoken bond of understanding. He shook the thoughts off as he finally got the all clear from the monks as they retreated to a safe distance. Alright, let's do this. Sora matched the blonde's grin as they moved to the center of the ceiling array. Naruto quickly created 10 shadow clones, most of which immediately closed their eyes to spare Naruto a rather intense headache. The ones that didn't led their clone brethren into a small ring with Sora at the center, each finding a spot to hold onto Sora with both hands. The original smiled warmly as he rested his hands directly on Sora's chest, already able to feel the gentle yet excited flow of his chakra. You ready? Sora seemed hesitant for a moment, but one look at the determination in his friend's steely eyes and that hesitation vanished with a small nod. Without further ceremony, Naruto closed his eyes and began to focus on his path, feeling past Sora to the seal on his stomach. The feeling of the Kyuubi's chakra was unmistakable within the seal, flowing quickly and erratically without a proper conscious mind to guide it. Naruto latched onto it, as did his 10 clones, and slowly they began to draw it out. The change was immediate as the virulent red chakra began flowing through Sora, pushing his less potent chakra aside. He was enshrouded by a familiar cloak, this time only one tail swaying behind him as Naruto held back the rest of the chakra, managing its flow through Sora and into him with care. The boy at the center of all this began to pant heavily. It felt like his body was slowly being roasted from the inside. Naruto noticed the red seep into his friend's eyes as soon as it happened, but he couldn't speed up the process any faster and he would begin to burn away Sora's chakra network. He just gritted his teeth, hoping he could finish before anything could happen. He should have known it would be a tall order as Sora began to thrash inside his circle of blondes, first the tail, then the clawed hands. The clones did their best to keep him steady and contained, but being as weak and fragile as they were, it wasn't much. Naruto couldn't risk them popping early either, that would cause an influx of chakra that could be dangerous for him. He was so focused on drawing out the chakra and keeping his clones from bursting under Sora's wild swings, he missed the bubbling red tail suddenly lunge at him from below. His cry echoed into the courtyard as the tail pierced his side, the burning from the vile chakra almost as bad as the wound itself. Come on, Sora. Don't give up just yet. We're nearly there. The wound was already closing as the chakra he absorbed went to work healing it. However, a clone was less lucky as the tail was once again brought around, slamming straight through its head. The original blonde winced at the influx of memories and chakra but held out just long enough for the last of the burning red cloak to ebb away. Naruto was able to give Sora one last smile before falling backwards, exhausted. Sora looked down at the unconscious blonde as he felt a wave of exhaustion hit him as well. Before he fell into the arms of one of the clones, he managed a weak smile. You kept your promise after all. Naruto realized what he was doing and stopped rubbing his side. The wound hadn't even scarred, but he remembered it vividly enough. He hadn't woken up for a whole day after that, the strain on his body from the extra Bayu chakra proving too much for him. If it hadn't been for his Preta path and the seal siphoning off the excess, he probably would have died. As it was, neither he nor Sora received any lasting damage. In fact, Sora's chakra system had been stretched quite a bit during the whole ordeal, leaving him with much larger reserves than before. However, that was a double-edged sword as his control went completely haywire. Something moving caught his eye, and as he looked around, he caught the bushy tail of a desert fox just disappearing over the peak of the dune he himself was climbing. That immediately sent his thoughts towards the other fox in his life as he looked down at his stomach. The small blonde sat calmly in a meditative position just outside the bars of the Kyuubi's cage, far enough that its claws could not reach him. The great fox was in its usual position deep within its cell, however every few minutes or so it would crack a single eye, observing its vessel with mild curiosity. Finally, after about an hour of nothing but the sounds of the enormous Bayu breathing, the Kyuubi pulled itself to its feet, walking over to the bars of the cage. What is it you are doing, Ninjan? Naruto didn't open his eyes, he didn't even move, he just continued to calmly sit there, focusing on the feel of his chakra through his body. After about 5 minutes, in which the great beast grew increasingly irritated to the point where it was about to bang against the bars, he spoke. I'm meditating. Enormous red eyes narrowed in indignation far above the peaceful human as its 9 tails swayed dangerously. The blonde was unfazed, he was now too used to the Kyuubi's hollow attempts at intimidation to even notice. I can see that, Ninjan. The smallest of smirks tweaked at the corners of Naruto's mouth, but he still didn't move. Then why did you ask? His response was a large gust of wind as the Kyuubi grunted in annoyance. Do you enjoy trying my patience, Ninjan? The usually loud and domineering voice was reduced to a low menacing growl which barely fazed the meditating monk in training. It's pretty amusing, I'll admit. The blonde finally let his hands rest at his sides as he looked up, his face adopting the same expression as his master with a serene smile and narrowed eyes. It was something he had been working on to both honor his teacher and irritate Sora, a win-win. And my name is Naruto. This time he didn't even get an immediate response, just the background sounds of the enormous tail swishing back and forth. All you Ninjan look alike, Why should I concern myself with such petty trivialities? Naruto shrugged nonchalantly, looking away for a moment as if in serious thought about the obviously rhetorical question. Common courtesy. Again all he got was an indignant snort as the great fox lay down on its stomach, head rested on its paws. Is there any particular reason for this visit, Ninjan? Do you not remember how all of our past encounters have gone? Naruto did in fact remember. He would come into the seal, attempt to gain a sliver of insight into the Kyuubi's motives or thoughts only to be rebuked and occasionally, forcibly ejected from the seal. He had gotten better at resisting it though once H found Kyuubi was using his chakra to push him out, it was a simply task to simply absorb it instead. The fox had stopped trying after the third attempt, opting instead to ignore the pest, at least until today. I wanted to ask you about the sage. The Kyuubi merely growled at him. It would have been incredibly threatening save for the enormous bars that stood between the two. You once said I couldn't compare to him, that means you must have known him. Suddenly the growling stopped and when Naruto looked up he saw the Kyuubi looking away, off into the darkness of the cell. What is this, Ninjan? Have you given up on your foolish quest to understand me? The great fox frowned as the blonde simply grinned in response. It unnerved the Bayou to see somebody so calm stand, or sit, before him. The last person to do that was, long dead, and the powerful being suddenly had to remind itself of that fact as it gazed down at the smiling blonde. Oh no, I never give up on anything, but I think you'll talk to me when you are ready. Ignoring the indignant grunt of denial that followed he continued. I simply want to learn more about my ancestor. It would be nice to know something about the original wielder of my eyes. How else am I supposed to live up to his legacy? He blinked when he found the great beast strangely quiet. Not even a dismissive growl was thrown his way. If that is your wish then you should simply give up now. The sage of the six paths was a god amongst you Ninjan. You will never even hope to retain even a sliver of the power that man wielded in a single hand. Naruto actually gawked for a moment. That had been the most passionate thing he had heard from the Kyuubi that had not been out of anger. The fox seemed to realize that as well and quickly resets its features into the usual scowl. Recovering quickly the same serene smile was quickly on Naruto's face. It sounds like you admire him. The Kyuubi looked down at the blonde, its slitted pupils narrowing slightly, however there was no denying grunt or snort. He had my respect. Naruto blinked again. This conversation was just full of surprises. So there is a side of you that is not simply rage and anger. As if to disprove this very point the Kyuubi growled deeply, glistening white teeth bared. Naruto filed the sage away as a touchy subject for the fox before standing up, dusting himself off despite the floor being immaculately clean. Well I better be going now, don't think this is over. The Kyuubi's answer was to get back up and slink off into the darkness which Naruto couldn't help but compare to a petulant child. Whatever you say Ninjan. With a satisfied nod Naruto took another look around the room before seemingly fading from existence. After that Naruto had slowly managed to worm information out of the rather petulant fox. No matter how indignant the Kyuubi might appear it was fairly easy for Naruto to rile it up enough get it to let slip some information. It was all about pushing the buttons necessary to irritate it, something the blonde was exceedingly skilled at. It helped Naruto could create essentially anything he could imagine within the seal, even if the ability did not extend to the seal itself. It seemed the fourth Hokage had no wish for the Kyuubi to find a way to make his prison more hospitable. According to the very vehement opinion of the Kyuubi, the sage was a very different person to Naruto. He was incredibly calm and level-headed, always having a plan for pretty much any situation and when he didn't he easily made up for it in pure unadulterated power. However begrudgingly the great fox admitted the two had their similarities, their attitudes towards never giving up for one. Apparently they also shared similar beliefs on peace, although whether or not that was due to their shared experiences as monks was debatable. Either way the fox was oddly aggressive when it came to the sage's various views and beliefs, never revealing too much. Naruto sighed as he began the long trudge up yet another dune. All he had on this monotonous trek through the shifting, scorching sands were his thoughts and memories. A light jangling from his shakuju suddenly broke his concentration, a soft smile gracing his lips as he looked at it. To his eyes it glowed with its own inner light, a pale blue that always managed to calm his swirling thoughts. It wasn't even 5 days ago he had received it, on the day he left the temple. I'm gonna miss you man. Naruto smiled sadly at his friend as the two came together for a warm hug. I'll miss you too. The blonde chuckled as they pulled away, his hand still on the former Jinchuriki's shoulder. But you know me, I'll be back. It's only a few years at most. Suddenly the two felt hands on their shoulders. Looking around they found Chiriku smiling at them fondly. Indeed, it is always a joyous occasion when a monk elects to go on a journey to find themselves, and at the same time it is filled with much melancholy. Nevertheless, it is a part of becoming a monk that we all must go through at some point. When Naruto returns, he will not only be stronger, but wiser from it. The blonde grinned appreciatively at his senpai. When he came back from this trip, he wouldn't have to call him that anymore. Sora, on the other hand, gave a small, but playful snort. PFFT, Naruto become wiser, you would have an easier time getting that spoon away from Chigasu. His face became slightly more serious as he turned back around, pulling something out of his robe pocket. But seriously, you better become stronger, man. I wouldn't want you to come back and be too easily defeated by me. He opened his hand, revealing a small bead shaped like a comma with a hole in the rounder part. Naruto had seen them worn by various monks around the temple before, as necklaces are attached to their belts. It was a magatama. Wow, thanks Sora. He picked up the small earring with a grin, quickly clipping it to his ear, the small white bead catching the sun for a moment. I appreciate it. He really did. It was a thoughtful gift, supposed to bring good luck on travels. There is something else, young Naruto-kun. The blonde turned to see Chukaku standing behind Chiriku. He wasn't quite sure when the old head monk had gotten there. It is quite likely you will face hardships and perils along your journey, as well as find joys and wisdom. The two often walk hand in hand. Along that line, I would like to give you something I would hope grants you even the smallest protection. Suddenly the man produced a long wooden case out of seemingly thin air, holding it out to the blonde before opening it. A shakuju. Naruto was confused, as it was rather irregular for a monk in training to receive his own staff. It was usually awarded after their self-pilgrimage. You don't recognize it? Looking closer, the blonde gasped in surprise, as he did in fact recognize the old wooden staff. With a slightly shaking hand he reached out and took the shakuju in his hand, not noticing as the monks looked on in interest. As he gripped the sturdy staff, he immediately felt a pull on his chakra as it began to slowly drain into the weapon tool. Immediately he stopped the flow, pulling back on his chakra with his preta path. The sage's staff. You are giving me this? Chukaku, after saying that the staff seemed to have no detrimental effect on the boy, nodded with a serene smile. Of course, it is part of your legacy, treat it well. The young Jinchuriki just nodded dumbly before stepping forward, wrapping his small arms around the old monk in a warm hug. Thanks Mas. Thanks Gigi, for everything you've done for me. Chukaku gently rubbed the boy's hair, his eyes opened for once, as he didn't want to miss a single second of the departure of a boy he had come to see as a surrogate grandson. You're very much welcome, Naruto-kun. Again Naruto schooled his face into his usual serene mask as he climbed over the peak of what seemed like his 1000th dune. He was truly sad leaving the temple behind him, but he knew that was not the last he would see of it. However, that wasn't to say he not excited. It was as though he was finally starting a new chapter in his life. There, far off on the horizon, as if to cement that idea, was a small, almost unnoticeable dot. Of course Naruto could see much with his eyes, and he knew exactly what that dot was. Sunagakure no Sato was in sight. The great sandstone walls of Sunagakure no Sato rose up high above the young monk, in stark contrast to the surrounding desert. He was quite thankful to finally arrive at the village, although calling it as such would be a stretch due to the sheer size of the ninja capital. The journey itself was not all that harrowing. Most of the time there was a breeze to stave off the worst of the sun's punishing rays, and at night Naruto was able to use the fire-natured chakra running through his body to warm himself. He remembered fondly when Chiriku had decided to test his and Sora's nature affinities. Sora's came up as wind, which was surprising due to the rarity of wind uses outside of Kase no Kuni. Of course, that paled in comparison to the surprise that Naruto was gifted with all 5 nature affinities, in what looked like equal measures. A feat that was considered biologically impossible by all the chakra experts in the known world. The look on Chiriku's face as the small piece of paper simultaneously split into 4 pieces, burnt, crumpled, dampened and crumbled into dust was absolutely priceless. Being the easiest to control, Naruto first began training his fire affinity, taking to it surprisingly quickly. Not to be outdone, Sora began his own elemental training, although Naruto didn't get to see the fruits of that effort as they had each only begun a month before Naruto left. However, the blonde managed to surprise Chiraku when he politely declined being taught any fire jutsu. He didn't really have an answer when asked why, especially by Sora, who just seemed confused. He would have thought learning jutsu would be right up Naruto's alley. Honestly though, it simply reminded Naruto too much of what his life might have been in Konoha. Then of course that brought him to memories of the day he lost everything he cared about, and it was just too painful for the blonde. His Rinnegan abilities were different, they were just as much a part of him as the actual eyes were themselves. He felt obligated to learn and understand them better. Even so, he completed the first stage of fire manipulation training. He didn't even have to use shadow clones to do so, which he was proud of. The exercise involved setting a small fire in the middle of a leaf and controlling the flames so they wouldn't burn outwards. There was the added incentive that if you couldn't do it, you burned your fingers. Sora felt less obligated to do it the slow way. He used the useful jutsu in abundance to complete his own wind manipulation training, splitting a leaf. In the end, between Sora's use of shadow clones and Naruto's impeccable control over his chakra, they finished around the same time. Standing there now though, with the sun bearing down on him and the enormous walls blocking a lot of the wind, ironically enough, fire-natured chakra wasn't all that helpful. He gave a small smile to the shinobi standing at the gate, who simply passed his rather bored gaze over the monk. Once he had deemed him simply a monk posing no immediate threat to Suna's safety, he handed Naruto a few forms to fill in. They were fairly standard liability forms, letting Naruto know that anything he did that was seen as wrong, while in Suna would be punishable as the Kazekage, or more likely the shinobi on hand, deemed fit. Once they were all filled out, he was quickly ushered through with a group of merchants, a few of which were obviously not locals, as they looked about ready to pass out from the heat. He felt especially sorry for a particularly large man wearing a lot of jewelry and finery that looked positively sweltering. Once he was in the village though, those thoughts left him as he gazed at the incredible sight. He had fond memories of Konoha mixed in with the bad, and he knew the village was a beautiful place to be. The forests surrounding the shinobi stronghold were lush and vibrant, as well as beautiful when they caught the light during a sunset. However, its beauty was incomparable to Suna's purely because the two places were so vastly different. Where Konoha had tall modern buildings nestled amongst more traditional estates, giving it a very multicultural appeal, Suna was slightly more uniform. All the buildings were built from the same material, a kind of multi-purpose sandstone that looked as solid as any good concrete or stone. However, that was where the uniformity ended. Each building looked as unique as it possibly could, most being either cylindrical or even spherical. Great walkways rose from the ground to straddle the sky, providing even more ways for civilians to get around the village. Yet there was something both villages both shared, and that was the vibrancy. People bustled through the streets, vendors peddled their wares to passersby, and everywhere he looked shinobi were going about their business or relaxing in various cafes and restaurants, obviously between missions or training. It brought a smile to the young monk's face that even hundreds of miles away these people were still recognizable as just that, people. No matter where they lived, they were all still human with the same needs, desires and wants that came with it. It was comforting. Of course, humans were also rude, as quickly evidenced by an impatient merchant jostling Naruto as he hurried by, forcing the young monk to steady himself with the shakuju. Ignoring the man, Naruto took to wandering the village for a while, taking in the sights of the vibrant and friendly people. He was not used to the slight inclinations of the head and occasional wave that were tossed his way as people passed him by. He wasn't sure if it was because he was dressed as a monk or because the people were just naturally this friendly. It was a stark contrast to his treatment in Konoha, where he might as well have not existed. After a while though, he began to grow hungry, so he stopped in what looked like a small park. There were swings and slides and other equipment associated with children, yet strangely there seemed to be nobody about. He took out a sealing scroll from one of his pockets, unsealing the box inside. Absently he noted he was running out of the rations Chiraku had given him at the start of his journey. He had put them to good use during his trek through the desert, although finding drinkable water was a whole other issue. He briefly wondered what he was supposed to do for money now that he was outside of the temple. In Konoha he had received a weekly stipend from the Hokage after leaving the orphanage. It wasn't a lot and he tended to be overcharged or refused service in most places, but it was enough to get by. He guessed he would have to do jobs for people to earn food or money once his ran out. With shadow clones and chakra-enhanced muscles he could be an excellent laborer. He wouldn't even be asking for much. He decided to think on it later as he noticed the doors to a large building across the park open and a rush of young children maybe a year or two younger than him run out. He realized with a slightly raised brow that this must be Suna's Shinobi Academy as he saw a few shuriken and kunai holsters on the young students, probably blunted. He watched with amusement as the kids began to play in the park during what was obviously a recess from their studies. He sighed though as he realized he too would be doing this had he stayed in Konoha. As he watched the children naturally congregate into the various friend groups, he wondered what kind of friends he might have had, if any. He didn't miss the casual glances he was getting from the nearby Chunin instructor, but those quickly stopped when Naruto made no move to do anything. Eventually he got up, broken from his melancholy as the children were ushered back inside by a loud bell that obviously marked their break as over. He walked past the front of the academy, intent on finding somewhere he could get some food or work. However, he paused as he heard rather heated voices coming from a small alleyway that ran around the back of the school. Quieting the jingle of his shakuju with a thin application of chakra through the staff, he calmly walked towards the voices, surprised to find 3 boys that were probably last year academy students all surrounding a younger girl who seemed to be from the year he had just seen playing outside. None of them seemed to notice him and he didn't bother hiding himself, just leaning on the wall of the alley as he listened in with interest. Please, I have to get back to class or sensei will be angry with me. It was the girl who spoke. She had brown hair that hung straight around her head down to her shoulders. Her voice was timid and full of fear as he bowed her head submissively to the 3 older boys. What's the point, huh? It's not like somebody like you could ever be a shinobi. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. The boy had a contemptuous sneer that the blonde recognized growing up. Yeah, what kind of ninja is afraid of weapons anyway? As if to emphasize his point, one of the others pulled a kunai out of his pouch, except these weren't the standard blunted weapon used from practice. This one gleamed in the weak light, the edges very much sharp and deadly. The effect on the girl was instantaneous. She tried to back away from the boy with the kunai but was blocked by the other 2. Naruto was simply appalled by this. Was this how shinobi of the same village treated their own? Maybe we should correct your little fear of weapons with a demonstration, eh? Let us show you just how effective they can be. Suddenly the girl was grabbed from behind in a strong hold, one arm thrust out in front of her as the boy walked closer, kunai glinting ominously. However, before the sharp edge could be applied to her skin, the small weapon suddenly flew from his hands as if drawn by some invisible force. When the 3 turned in the direction it had flown, they saw Naruto standing there, the kunai in his hand as he observed it idly. Did you know the kunai used to be a gardening tool? They were used in royal gardens and monks' temples alike, a wonderful multi-purpose tool used for levering and digging. It was the ninja who turned it into a weapon, cheap to make and simple to sharpen. Suddenly a simple item used for gardening had been turned into a weapon designed to kill. Naruto looked up as he began to bend the kunai in his hands, using chakra to enhance his strength. Hey, who the hell are you? The tallest of the 3 boys stepped forward to face the newcomer, obviously either the leader of the trio or the resident hothead. Naruto simply chuckled as he let the kunai drop to the sandy ground, the weapon bent out of any kind of useful shape. Me. I'm just a simple traveling monk. The boy sneered, the earlier impossible feat forgotten as he immediately dismissed the boy smaller than he was. You're just a runt, get lost. We're 5th year academy students, practically genin already. Naruto sighed in an exaggerated manner, taking the opportunity to rest his staff against the wall of the alleyway. I weep for your village the day people like you are legally allowed to become shinobi. The boy growled angrily, affronted that some brat kid would speak to him like that. He immediately drew out a second kunai as Naruto dropped back into a taijutsu stance none of them recognized. The almost genin stopped for a moment before laughing at the blonde. You're going to try and fight me. You're just a monk, I don't even recognize that stupid stance. Naruto allowed a fleeting smile to flicker over his lips that slightly unnerved the boys still holding the girl. This is the starter stance for the Mizu no Mai. I'm not surprised you don't recognize it, I'm still developing it after all. As he spoke his head lowered and brought his arms up, one in front of his body and one behind so that it looked like his whole body was slightly tilted forwards. Both his palms were facing upwards and his legs were also spaced out in front and behind. In all it almost looked like he was bowing. It should be enough to show you that a weapon certainly does not make one a shinobi. As if that was some kind of signal the other boy rushed forwards, bringing the kunai down in a high arc. Naruto waited until the last moment, his eyes still closed before suddenly moving out of the way. His whole body span, so close to the other boy they could have held a piece of paper between them. As he did, one hand grabbed a hold of the wrist holding the kunai before sliding under the boy, still in one clean sweeping motion. Continuing the flow of his strangely hypnotizing dance, he pulled his body into the splits, simultaneously taking out both of the boy's feet from under him. Instead of falling flat on his face though, Naruto almost gently rolled the boy to the ground so that his back was to the ground. Throughout the whole maneuver he had never let go of the boy's wrist. He backed off, allowing the boy to stand, which he did, getting to his feet with a surprised expression that quickly hardened into a scowl. What kind of pathetic move was that? It didn't even hurt. If that's all you're going to do then. Suddenly the boy began swaying in his feet, feeling incredibly drained, like he had been fighting for hours instead of a few seconds. Hey, what did you? He didn't get a chance to finish as his eyes rolled back and he dropped bonelessly to the ground. His two friends suddenly released the girl as they backed away from Naruto, not really wanting to mess with somebody who could take out their leader in a single move. He'll be fine in about an hour, he's just exhausted. Even so, you should take him now and go, I don't really want to fight you. Not even waiting for him to finish, the two boys scurried forward, grabbed their friend and dashed off, leaving Naruto alone in the alley with the girl. Thank you, Monk-san. Naruto just gave an easy smile, his almost closed eyes turning up as he waved his hand dismissively. No problem. The girl took the hint as she moved closer, her head finally rising for the first time to reveal a rather cute face and shining black eyes that seemed common in Suna. Matsuri. Naruto smiled again as he reached for his shakuju, even though he was a bit unnerved by the look of adoration on the girl's face. Well then, no problem, Matsuri, I'm happy to help out. He turned to go but thought better of it as he turned back to face the smaller girl. Just remember, a weapon does not make a shinobi. Find your own way in life, never let others tell you what you're doing is the wrong way. With that last piece of wisdom, the blonde finally made to leave, only to feel a small hand grab onto his own. Wait, I don't know your name. The blonde turned with that same smile that reached his eyes. It's Naruto. Again he found looking at that admiring stare slightly disconcerting. It was so foreign to him. How can I thank you? Naruto placed a hand on the girl's shoulder, unintentionally reading her chakra, and was pleasantly surprised to find she had good reserves for a 10-year-old considering she was only a year younger than him. You don't, like I said, I was happy to help. And with that he gave a wave and walked off, leaving the jingling of his shakuju echoing in the alley. Naruto spent the next few days in Suna taking in the various sights as well as doing odd jobs to earn some food. At night he would sleep in a small out-of-the-way temple near the edge of the village, the kindly master reminding him a lot of Chukaku. Right now he was standing outside a very large and very ornate building, one of the few that weren't cylindrical or spherical. He walked through the door, smiling slightly as he saw the rows upon rows of books, stacked high on shelves covering every wall and more. This was what his pilgrimage was about. Every monk chooses something they want to discover or learn about and they dedicate themselves to it until they are satisfied. Some chose to ponder the mysteries of life and existence, others taking more philosophical routes delving into human nature. Naruto had chosen to try and understand the nature of chakra itself, to follow in his ancestors' footsteps and hopefully one day surpass him. That was why he needed to travel, to gain perspective. Information tended to be heavily biased towards the ones writing it. That was why he needed to gain a broader understanding of the world, to see the bigger picture from as many angles as possible. He couldn't think of a better place to start than a library, especially one in a ninja village where chakra is part of daily life. However, he quickly ran into a problem. The area where all that information was stored happened to be in the shinobi area. He was not a resident of Suna, nor was he a shinobi in their ranks, so the information was off limits for him. Of course, if he tried to henge and got caught, he could be severely punished under suspicion of being a spy. He sighed as he sat outside on the steps leading up to the library, watching as a chameleon slowly made its way up the wall, stopping occasionally to blend in. They were remarkable creatures. Evolution had made it so when they were perfectly still and camouflaged, even their chakra was undetectable. He wished he had that ability. It would make getting the information easier. Suddenly a thought struck him as he got up, quickly making his way back through the streets towards the academy. Hey Matsuri. The young brown-haired girl suddenly jumped in surprise as the voice appeared out of nowhere. She sighed as she turned around before a smile found its way to her face as she saw just who it was. Naruto-san. The blonde just chuckled as he rubbed the back of his head, his eyes still appearing to be closed. Just Naruto is fine. How are you doing? The girl beamed, looking very different from the shy and timid person she had been before. Great. Those bullies left me alone and haven't bothered me again. I think they believe you'll come back to finish them if they do. Naruto just returned her beaming grin with one of his own. That's good. Suddenly some of the girl's confidence seemed to drain away as she nervously placed her hands behind her back, looking down at her feet. Naruto-san, I want to do what you told me, find my own way to do things, without weapons. She clenched her eyes shut for a moment before shooting them open as she brought her hands around to clasp in front of her almost pleadingly. So do you think you could teach me that taijutsu style? Naruto's smile suddenly took a saddened turn as he gently patted Matsuri's shoulder, the girl already knowing what that meant. Sorry Matsuri, that style relies on a special ability of mine that other people can't do, otherwise it is mostly about dodging attacks while redirecting the force of blows in a harmless way. Plus, I haven't even finished it yet, it's part of a larger taijutsu style I am creating. While Matsuri looked saddened, there was also a slightly awed gleam in her eyes. Creating a taijutsu style was supposed to be one of the hardest thing a shinobi could do, and a boy who only looked a year older than her and wasn't even a ninja was doing just that. Oh, okay then. She looked down and Naruto couldn't stand to see the dejected look on her face, it was heart-wrenching. But hey, that's not the only thing I could teach you. Suddenly the girl looked back up in a complete emotional 180, hope sparkling in her now drying eyes. Naruto nervously rubbed his head, wondering how Matsuri had managed to flip the conversation around. He was supposed to be the one asking a favor of her. Yeah, I can. He thought for a moment about what he could teach her before a sly grin spread across his face. How about I teach you this? He quickly walked to a nearby wall before placing one foot on and just continuing on up. Wow, that's so cool. The blonde just grinned as he jumped back down before frowning as Matsuri once again emotionally flipped to saddened again. But you've already done so much for me. How can I repay you for this now? Finally Naruto allowed a small genuine smile on his face as he wrapped one arm around the smaller girl's shoulders. Well, now that you mention it. Naruto was meditating in a park, enjoying the feel of a new space to relax in. He couldn't quite describe it, but the area felt different to his home at the fire temple. Not in the traditional sense that it was hotter or it just looked different, it actually physically felt different. He remembered back to the analogy he had given the head monk about the green chakra he could see in the stones and plants. It was like he was seeing a new, different piece of that same puzzle out here in the desert. He would have to think about it more. There was something about this other chakra that he just felt a need to understand. It was too mysterious for him not to try and learn about it. One thing he did know was that he couldn't absorb it with his preta path. Either that or he was doing something wrong when he tried, but for the life of him he couldn't figure out what. He was disturbed from his thoughts as he felt Matsuri enter the park. That was another thing, when he meditated like that, focusing solely on the other chakra, he gained a limited awareness of the area around himself. Naruto-san. Again he managed to shock Matsuri as he suddenly dropped down next to her from the branch he had been meditating on, upside down. To her credit though, she didn't yelp out loud like the last time. Matsuri, I already told you just to call me Naruto. The girl waved him off, which actually amused Naruto. It seemed she had once again gained a small confidence boost which he only suspected was good for her. Look, I got the scrolls for you. She quickly produced a set of scrolls for him, 6 of them in total, from a satchel hanging from her shoulder. My brother was really surprised when I asked him to get them for me. Matsuri seemed to almost sparkle with happiness as Naruto gave her a warm smile, the girl suddenly feeling a little lightheaded, and it wasn't from the heat. Thanks a lot Matsuri, this means a lot to me and I couldn't have done it without you. It wasn't entirely true, but the blonde didn't think it would be bad to stoke the girl's self-confidence just a little. He created a hand sign and suddenly a perfect replica of himself suddenly appeared, taking the scrolls from the girl. Matsuri just gawked at the very much solid clone the monk had made. At the academy they only taught the regular clone jutsu, which was a glorified illusion. Wow, can you teach me that? Naruto chuckled as he began to run through a few hand seals. Not really, it requires a lot of chakra, otherwise it's dangerous. Matsuri seemed indignant as Naruto finished his jutsu, placing his hand over the scrolls as another, identical set suddenly puffed into existence. Matsuri didn't even seem surprised anymore after seeing what Naruto could already do. Making clones of the scrolls didn't seem like a stretch. Plias. My sensei says I have loads of chakra for my age, the most in our year. For the first time in his young life, Naruto found himself on the receiving end of the dreaded, female secret technique, puppy dog eyes no jutsu. For a young boy with little experience with the opposite Shay, thanks to his zero interaction with his peers followed by 4 years in a temple, it was too much. Well, I mean, if you really promise to be careful with it and not use more than one at a time until you're sure you're ready, then I guess. He wasn't allowed to finish as he was suddenly tackled to the ground by an overjoyed Matsuri, her arms wrapped around him in her attempt at a crushing hug. Naruto found it strangely nice. He had been hugged before, but never by a girl. It was certainly different. Thank you so much. Everybody's going to be really jealous when I show them what I can do. Naruto chuckled slightly as the girl finally got off of him, blushing slightly when she noticed what she had been doing. You know, humility is the sign of a truly great person. Matsuri's blush deepened as she shyly looked away. Plus, I would really appreciate if you tried to keep it as secret as possible. The technique is not supposed to be known by Suna Shinobi. If you go around showing people, they will get suspicious of where you learnt it. I don't think they'll believe a wandering monk was kind enough to teach it to you. Matsuri looked crestfallen at that, so Naruto got up, pulling her with him. He managed to surprise her with his strength. But anyway, how about I show you that first one? You'll need all the chakra control you can for the shadow clone technique. Naruto spent almost a month teaching Matsuri. He had to be very careful when teaching her the shadow clone jutsu. It turned out even after learning the surface clinging technique she had difficulties, so he had gone on to teach her how to walk on water. After that, he was very grateful for his ability to pass on his chakra to other people, as Matsuri could barely make 2 clones in a row before almost passing out from chakra exhaustion. By the end, she was embarrassingly calling him Naruto-sensei, but nevertheless she got it. They didn't get a lot of time to practice between her going to the academy and her responsibilities at the orphanage. Something the two shared in common. It was enlightening for Naruto to finally gain a friend around his age besides Sora, and talking with a girl proved to be very new to him. With Sora he shared a very competitive rivalry. Even the smallest thing could set the two off. With Matsuri on the other hand, he likened it to an almost brother-sister relationship, or at least that was how he pictured it, even if Matsuri felt differently. Right now he was sitting in one of the many training grounds outside of Suna village, but still within the mighty walls. He had to be there as it was one of the few grounds with trees that could grow leaves in the desert's harsh climate. The scrolls Matsuri had brought him proved to be very interesting, especially the ones about wind chakra. Being Kase no Kuni, Sunagakure proved to have the most comprehensive knowledge of wind-natured chakra in the elemental nations. Right now though, he was practicing the leaf-cutting exercise. He could already do it, but he was working on cleaning up his cut into a perfect line. It wasn't like he could move on to the next stage anyway. There were no waterfalls within the village. Suna Shinobi wanting to master wind chakra were taken to a special oasis somewhere that was a secret. He was also working on his fire manipulation at the same time, so pretty soon he had run out of leaves, forcing him to move into the training ground he was sitting in today. He had also looked for any hint of this other chakra he kept feeling. Even sitting in a sandy, almost lifeless field like this one, he could see the faintest hints of that green chakra. Unfortunately, nothing like that was mentioned in any of the scrolls Matsuri had brought him. He had found references to the life force of the world, but that didn't sound quite right. He was sure what he saw was a type of chakra, and life force was supposed to be very different. He was roused from both his thoughts and his training as he felt a set of eyes on him. Looking up, he saw a young girl, maybe 2 or 3 years older than him. Her sandy blonde hair matched the color of the dusty ground beneath them and was pulled into 4 spiky ponytails, not dissimilar from his. She wore a long white shirt that almost looked like a dress on her, loosely tied around her waist by a light blue sash. Right now she was staring at him with curiosity, the Suna headband tied around her neck shifting as she cocked her head. Hey, who are you and why are you in my training ground? That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.